particleIllusion for After Effects. I want to talk very briefly about the installer. Once the install finishes, this is the final screen you'll see. You've got two options that I want to go over. The first one is download the installer for the additional emitter libraries. The installer for particleIllusion for After Effects only installs a single library. There are dozens of other ones available. So if you already have particleIllusion 3 installed on your computer, then you probably have all the emitter libraries, and you don't need to have them installed again. So you want to uncheck this option. If you do not have particleIllusion 3 installed, or you know you don't have the extra emitter libraries, then you want to make sure that that's checked. And what will happen is your browser will open, it will download the installer. You want to save that to your drive and then run that, and it will install all the emitter libraries for you. In After Effects, I have some footage loaded, and I want to apply particleIllusion to it. So go to Effect, Wonder Touch, particleIllusion. And in particleIllusion, there's no such thing as a blank or empty emitter, so you've always got to start with a preset. And so this is the Emitter Selection dialog that shows up. If you're not familiar with particleIllusion 3, on the left here you'll see the library window. It shows all the emitters that are in the currently loaded library. The one that shows initially is the default library. It's got a sampler it's sort of a sampler library that shows a lot of different types of effects that are available. If you want to load a different library, click the Load Library button and then select the library that you want manually. An easier way, though, is to go ahead and do a search. So we'll use our search functions over here, and let's say I wanted to search for smoke emitters. I click search, and since this is the first time I'm searching, it's doing a index build. It's kind of indexing all the emitters that are on my system and making them searchable. I should point out that the emitter search is done by emitter name only. There's no key data in the emitters other than the name. So when I type smoke, I'm going to get all the emitters that have smoke in their title. So once the search index data is built, and that doesn't happen every time, that only happens the first time or when you actually click the build index button to rebuild your search data. And now it shows me my results of my search, which is about 300 plus emitters that have smoke in the title. And I'm looking for something that's kind of wispy and thin, so here's a thin smoke disperse. I'm going to go ahead and use that. Incidentally, if I wanted to go ahead and find, return every emitter that's on my system, I can do an empty search, remove everything from the keywords, include no spaces, nothing, and do an OR search, and it would return every emitter on my system. I'm just going to use this one right now. And there I've got my thin smoke in my project. So let's take a look at some of the parameters now. So if we spin open this emitter, we can see that it's a fairly simple emitter, and it's got only one particle type, one component to it. It's still got about 20 or so parameters, and depending on the emitter that you've added, it could be more complex, and you could have hundreds of parameters. But don't panic, because they're all pretty much the same. So if you take a look here, you can see that we've got life, number, size, velocity, etc. at the top level, which are shown as percentages, and then you've got at the lower level, you've got life, number, size, velocity, etc., which are shown as just straight numbers, no percentages. At the top level, which is the emitter level, those are considered scaling factors that apply to all the values below it. So if this emitter was made up of multiple particle types, then changing the size, for instance, at the top level would change the size value for all the particle types. By changing it at the lower level here would change it only for the selected particle type. So in this case, since it's only a single particle type in this effect, changing size at either level has the same effect. It makes the particles bigger. So if we go ahead and we can adjust the visibility, we can see the visibility is at 100%, but if we look lower down, the visibility at the particle type level is only 21%. So the 100% scaling factor above is applied to the lower 21%. One thing to point out about the particle type level is that these basic parameters, life, number, size, have variation parameters as well. So if you wanted particles to be different sizes, you would set size variation to a higher value. If you want them all to be exactly the same size, then you want to use set that to 0. So let's look at a little more advanced emitter, something we call a super emitter that has an additional level of complexity here. So I've removed that. I'm going to add particleIllusion again just so we can select a different emitter. I'm going to load the default library back up again and take a look at that. Further down in the library, we've got some nice super emitter examples. Here's a pretty simple one that will show us what's going on with super emitters. So Here's the super emitter. A super emitter, definition of a super emitter is an emitter that creates other emitters which then create particles, as opposed to a regular emitter, which is an emitter that creates particles directly. So in this case, if we spin it open, it's a relatively simple super emitter, but you can see that there's three levels of parameters now. The top level, a mid level here, and then the bottom level, which is what we saw in the previous example. So at this point, changing the lowest level parameter will still affect the particles. So changing the velocity to 0, for instance, makes the particles not move after they're born. So you can see now that they're being created and just staying where they were. If we look now at the intermediate level here, this is the free emitter level. So a super emitter creates free emitters which act a little bit like particles, but they're not visible, and then those free emitters create particles. So the F in front of these parameters indicates that those are going to affect the free emitters themselves. So if we change F velocity, it's not going to change the way the particles themselves move. It doesn't make the particles move faster or slower. It changes the speed at which the free emitters themselves move. So you can see as I adjust that down, the free emitters, which are kind of the invisible objects that are creating all these lines of particles, are moving less, and should be pretty obvious what's going on there. So even though super emitters are more complex, you look at them and you still get a pretty intuitive grasp of what's going on. We still got the velocity, size, and all those types of things, but you also have the F versions of them which apply to the free emitters. And probably playing around with some of these emitters a little bit will get you a little more familiar with how that works. Again, if you load a really complex emitter, you can have 2 levels of free emitters here, and then each one of those can have, I believe, 3 or 4 levels of particle types, and so you can get quite a large number of parameters in here. So, like I said, in the hundreds. But if you look at them closely, they're all duplicates of the same type of parameters. So might be a little daunting when you see some of those more complex emitters, but pretty manageable once you look at it closely. So I've chosen a preset emitter, and I want to adjust it a little bit because it's not quite exactly what I want. It's a great starting point, that's the whole point of the presets for the emitter libraries, but it's not exactly what I want. So what I want to do is go ahead and get rid of the sparks. I'm not really liking the way the sparks are working here. So if we take the sparks, maybe you might think that taking the visibility down to 0 would be the best solution, but yeah, it makes them go away, but really they're still there. The best thing to do is take the number down to 0 so it doesn't create any sparks at all. So that looks a little better, and maybe I want to go ahead and maybe that intense center is too strong for me. I can adjust the size of those particles, make it look a little different. It's not quite right. So I'm still not real happy with this. It looks kind of intense here, and there's a little bit of smoke fringing going on. So what do I want to do? I need to get this to blend a little bit better. So I'm going to take the effect and move it to an adjustment layer. So I'll create a new adjustment layer, and then we will take particleIllusion off of our footage layer, and we will paste it onto our adjustment layer, and then I'll change the adjustment layer. I don't know, I'll make it screen, I think is probably a good choice, and brightens things up a bit, but it also makes those particles blend a little bit better. I think I actually might want to go ahead and make the center a little bit bigger again to make it a little more impressive. So the other thing that I noticed is that I want that emitter to be going at the beginning. At the beginning of my footage, I don't have it going. The particles are just getting started. So having the emitter by itself on a separate layer, I can go ahead and slide that layer to the left in time to get the emitter going. You can see that the emitter is now creating some particles right away. And that's more along the lines of what I'm looking for this effect. That's also the way I would go ahead and add additional emitters as well. Probably would create a new layer and add a separate instance of particleIllusion and add another emitter if I needed it. That gives me a little more flexibility. But putting them in different layers allows me to go ahead and move those around and combine them in different ways. That's a little more flexible. So that's a quick look at particleIllusion for After Effects. Thanks for watching.